A few weeks ago, I released a video challenging Maximilian Dude's suggestion that it was too late for beginners to get into Guilty Gear Strive. Max's argument was essentially that beginners should focus on fighting games with a large community of other beginners, meaning you can get on ranked and easily find people of your level. With the help of Go Low, I countered that any fighting game can be good for beginners if they are willing to put a bit of effort in, and you only really need to find one person to play with to make it work. A comment on that video made me think that Max's argument actually makes a lot of sense for casual players. But what is the difference between a beginner and a casual? In this video, I'll try to define that difference and rate some fighting games for how good they are for these two types of players. For me, casuals are those who want to turn the game on, press some buttons, and have fun without necessarily trying to learn or seek out resources outside of the game to get better at it through a deeper understanding. Casualness is about the level of effort the player wants to put into getting better at the game. On the other hand, when I talk about beginners in my video, I usually mean someone who is far from mastering the game, but is willing to make an effort towards doing so. A total newcomer to the genre might be a beginner or a casual, or maybe they're not sure yet how much effort they are willing to put into the game. A very experienced fighting game player might be a beginner when they try a new release, or a casual just playing some sets to relax. You're not fixed as one or the other. One day I might want to watch some YouTube videos, make some notes, and analyze replays of my ranked matches to better understand the game and where I'm going wrong. Other days I get home from work exhausted and just want to turn my brain off and enact some casual video game violence. Obviously, this is just one way of using these words, it's not the one true meaning. But by these definitions, I think it's safe to say that almost any fighting game can be good for a beginner, depending on how much effort they are willing to put in. But some might not be good for a casual. If there's no single player content and nobody online, a casual probably doesn't want to have to go hunting on Discord for an opponent. I tend to assume that if someone is seeking out fighting game content on YouTube, whether one of my videos or one of Maximilian's or anybody else's, they probably fall closer to the beginner camp than the casual one. And that's what I have in mind when I talk about fighting game beginners. So with that clarification out of the way, let's look at how good various games are, in my opinion, for fighting game beginners and casuals. When plotting these out, I found they landed in three rough clusters. First, games that are good for beginners but less good for casuals. This includes indie games with small but active communities like Them's Fightin' Herds and Merfight. Pocket Bravery lands in this cluster, but the sheer amount of single player content bumps it up a bit on the casual axis. Fantasy Strike and Tough Love Arena are both designed to be beginner friendly and are also both free. The fact that Tough Love Arena can be played on pretty much any computer with a web browser for free without even having to make an account or log in unless you want to play ranked would make it even better for casuals, especially if it had a bigger player base to make it easier to find a quick match. Also in this cluster are bigger games with smaller online communities where you can find a match but you might have to wait a bit and the opponent might not be at your level. Melty Blood type Lumina is brilliant, but the single player content is limited and the online community isn't huge. Samurai Showdown is great for beginners and now has rollback netcode, but likewise doesn't have the biggest online community. And I'm putting Third Strike here as a bit of a stand-in for other older games that you can play on Fightcade. Being a bit older, these often have a lot of learning materials and people willing to play, but it's hard to find opponents in official releases like the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection. If you need to install Fightcade to have anyone to play against online, that's going to put a lot of casuals off. Another cluster comprises games which are arguably better for casuals than for beginners. These games are all simpler than traditional fighting games, which makes them very easy to pick up and play for a casual who wants to have some fun but doesn't want to have to spend much time learning the game. That's not to say that these games are totally shallow. They have their own depths, and a beginner who wants to learn will find some meat on these bones. But at the end of the day, any traditional fighter will have more complexity. In this cluster, I'm including Nidhogg, Two Strikes, Dive Kick, Sklash, and First Cut. These games are all great for some casual single-player fun or in-person multiplayer, but they do lose some casual points for not having very big online communities to jump into. Finally, we have games that are great for both beginners and casuals. I'm including Super Smash Bros. Ultimate here. It's just so incredibly popular that it's easy to find learning materials for beginners and just as easy to find online opponents for casuals. The online netcode is quite bad, but even if that puts you off, there is loads of single player content, and in my experience at least, it has been easier to find people to play Smash with offline than other fighting games. The huge and nostalgic roster can be a pull for both types of player as well. Granblue Fantasy Versus Rising is good for both beginners and casuals. The developers have built in features to make the fighting more accessible to newcomers through the simplified inputs for special moves, and to provide casual ways to spend time with your friends in game without fighting if you're not in the mood for it, such as the Grand Bruise mode. The fact that there is a free version with almost everything included, except that the roster is limited to Gran plus a rotating selection of other characters, makes it even more accessible both to casuals who don't want to spend money on something they won't be playing seriously, and to beginners who want to try the game before deciding whether to spend the time and money on learning it properly. Like many of the games in this cluster, Mortal Kombat 1 has to be here through sheer player numbers. Despite some ongoing connection issues and delays to features including crossplay, MK1 remains an enormously popular game, meaning casuals won't struggle to find a match on short notice, and beginners have plenty of resources to learn from. The single player content is good and gets regular updates through Invasions mode, which also earns it some points in the casual rankings. Guilty Gear Strive. I know I said that Maximilian's argument didn't make sense to me for my definition of a beginner, but applied more to casuals, but I still think he was wrong in the case of Strive specifically. The game has reached and maintained levels of popularity that I don't think anyone predicted, with new DLC characters and even new mechanics reviving interest every so often. It's not great for anyone looking for a single player experience, but there are plenty of people of all levels to fight online, reasonably thorough tutorials, and lots of people making guides outside of the game for beginners to learn from. That brings me to the last two games on the list, and in my opinion, the two best fighting games available at the moment for both beginners and casuals: Joy Mech Fight and Garou Mark of the Wolves. No, not really. I am of course referring to Tekken 8 and Street Fighter 6. When Street Fighter 6 was released, it felt like a game changer. The World Tour mode was a revelation. Capcom were taking in-game teaching more seriously than any fighting game developer had before, creating an unprecedentedly deep but accessible mode for learning the game without feeling like you were at school, managing to make it fun for experienced players as well. Along with fantastic graphics, fun gameplay, and the incomparable legacy of the Street Fighter series, it was inevitable that the game would be immensely popular, and it is. Many brilliant games in the genre have been released in the months following Street Fighter 6's release, but it didn't feel as if any were taking the leap forward that World Tour mode had. The closest, in my opinion, has been Tekken 8. The Arcade Quest mode is certainly simpler and shorter than World Tour, but it does an excellent job of giving newer players a comprehensible approach into this notoriously complex series. The game also has a reasonable amount of other single-player content, a casual game mode for some silly fun, Tekken Ball, and a massive online community both to play with and to learn from. These are just my opinions, and at the end of the day, every game I've mentioned will have beginners and casuals who love it and others who hate it. Tekken 8 and Street Fighter 6 do an amazing job of giving you plenty to learn from in-game, which benefits casuals who don't want to be looking up guides, and also beginners who can get themselves further along the path of learning before turning to outside resources. Personally, I don't feel I've come close to mastering any fighting game yet, but I would like to, so I consider myself a beginner, though I certainly have my casual days. In most of my videos, I strive to explain that beginner perspective on the games I try, hopefully giving you the information to decide for yourself whether a game is for you.